All right, welcome everybody to Module 1 of the Canadian Readiness Program. During this week, we will be talking all about Canada and defining your business for the Canadian market. Hello, can you still guys hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Yes, you sound good.
All right, perfect.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. So if you guys can accept the people that is joining the call, you are all able to do it. All right, so
I'm doing it right now.
All right, let's begin. And I guess I saw Luis Felipe joining. Hey, Luis Felipe, thank you for joining us. So as you know, this program, the objective and the benefits is that you can define and kind of like reach the Canadian market. We will help you build a strong go-to-market strategy where you can target Canadian customers. We will help you define a brand and marketing strategy where you can use the right tools to reach those Canadian customers and determine your revenue model, what works and what doesn't. So today, or the learning objectives of this week is that you can define your problem for the business that you're trying to solve for Canadian customers, determine the product and revenue models, and describe how you will succeed in this amazing market. During the module 1, we have Erin Thomson, who is on the line today. So thank you, Erin, for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Erin. She will kick off this program with all about Canada. So during the next hour, we will have an overview of our amazing country, our experiences, strengths, and opportunities, and she will walk us through these amazing opportunities and how it means to be Canadian. The second session is on Thursday. If you don't have the link, some of you have been reading me and writing me and calling me. So I will send the link separately in another email so you can access as well. In the session on Thursday, that one is a longer session, it's 2 hours. I will kick off the session with some tools and concepts and guidelines on how to create your value proposition for Canada. And then we will have a working session with Danny Ho in adjusting your product service for Canada. And he will share his amazing research in which tools, capabilities, and links you can access to kind of like do your own research, marketing research, and do your research about consumers, about technology trends, and about competitors. So with that, I want to thank Erin. Erin, we are all yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Good.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great.
Good afternoon.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Okay, let me know if you can see the presentation slides okay?
Yes.
Yeah, as well.
Yep, it's available.
Excellent. All right, so as Vivi already introduced, this topic will be all about Canada. So talking a little bit more about our Canadian culture and the opportunities that exist here. So my name is Erin Thomson. I will be your host for the next hour or so. And just to give a little bit of background about myself, I currently work as an analyst with the Technology and Process Improvement team at the University of Waterloo. The University of Waterloo is really known for technology, mathematics, and engineering programs. Between this and my previous roles, I've got about 10 years of experience working in the Canadian tech industry. I've worked for all kinds of organizations, from very small local nonprofits, 10 or less people, all the way up to working for Hewlett-Packard Canada, obviously a very large multinational company. In terms of my educational background, I have a Bachelor of Commerce from McGill University, concentrating in information systems and entrepreneurship, and I also have a minor in economics. And on a bit of a personal note, mi esposo es mexicano, so I can give a little bit of personal perspective on some of the differences in culture you might see, doing business in Canada versus in Latin America. But just don't test my Spanish. It won't go well. To give you a bit of an overview for what to expect from today's session, we'll first start off with Canada at a glance. So this will be a really high-level overview of Canada as a country. We'll take a look at our history, some of the key influences, our system of government, a little bit about immigration, human rights, just to start getting a sense for Canada as a country overall. Then we'll take a look at Canadians, looking at a few stats to better understand the Canadian population and how this might impact your business. We'll move on to talk more about Canadian business culture. So what are some of the differences you might see when you're doing business in Canada and what to expect? Then we'll take a look at some of the consumer traits in Canada. So some of the things that uniquely differentiate us from other consumers, including in the US, which is very important. And what are some of the key things right now that Canadian consumers are interested in? We'll take a look at the Canadian tech industry, give a little bit of sizing, see where some of the opportunities are, and where there's some government incentives and support for the Canadian tech industry. And then we'll take a look at specific Canadian tech hubs, so specific locations within Canada that have really booming local tech industries, what they're known for, and some of the key players there. So does anyone have any questions before I move on the agenda?
Not yet, maybe later.
Okay, great. We're off to a good start.
No, thank you.
Excellent. All right, so let's start off with Canada at a glance. So this is Canadian history and current state condensed into one slide. So Canada is a relatively young country. It was founded in 1867 with the creation of the British North America Act. And Britain did continue to have a very strong influence in Canada all the way up until the 1980s, when our constitution was basically brought back home to be governed within Canada. So again, you'll see a really strong British influence here. And we'll talk about this later, but the Queen Elizabeth does still continue to be our monarch as well. And in addition to this British influence, there's obviously other founding peoples within Canada. So certainly we have a very large Indigenous population. And to be fully transparent, there are some issues, I would say, in Canada's history with regards to the treatment of those Indigenous peoples. So that is something to be aware of, and something that we are still working to come to terms with as a country. And in addition, there's also a very strong French influence in Canada. You're probably already familiar with that. So French settlers were actually the first non-Indigenous people in Canada. However, there was a defeat of the French by the British in the 7 Years' War. So nowadays, where you'll really primarily see the French influences in Canada is within the province of Quebec and the province of New Brunswick. And so you might be asking, what impacts does this have on my business? This all seems fairly historical. So what really makes this important with regards to your business is the fact that because of these influences, we do have language laws in Canada. So French and English are our two official languages, and there are laws with regards to the marketing and the packaging of products and services in both official languages. So this can tend to vary region by region. It can be a little bit different. So you'll definitely want to seek some specific advice on this, depending on where you're interested in doing business or where you're, working with other companies to market products and services in Canada. But it's just to be aware that, from our marketing and packaging perspective, there are language differences and in some cases cultural differences to be aware of here. In terms of Canada's geography, again, I think this is pretty self-evident. So we're a massive country, about 9.1 million square kilometers, second largest country in the world. But despite that, we're actually fairly sparsely populated. So we only have about 38 million people. And most Canadians live within a few hundred kilometers of the Canada-US border. So the further north you get here in Canada, it becomes extremely rural and extremely remote very, very quickly. So really, we're all concentrated within that sort of more southern edge of the country. Canada is divided up into 10 provinces and 3 territories. So again, a pretty large landmass within each of those respectively. In terms of immigration to Canada, we do have a very high immigration rate. So as of 2019, there were over 8 million immigrants living within Canada with what's called permanent resident status. So this is roughly 21% of the overall population. And we receive over 300,000 new immigrants per year. Most of these come from India, followed by China, and then the Philippines is the 3rd largest country of origin. So with all this immigration, in general, Canadians are very supportive of this idea of having a multicultural society. So rather than having people come here and just sort of drop their cultures and move on, we're generally fairly supportive of having all these different cultures and different backgrounds coexist within Canada. It's not to say that this is totally ubiquitous. You know, you can still encounter some people that have some different ideas on this, but in general, it's fairly widespread. We're a fairly tolerant and accepting country. In terms of our system of government, of course, Canada is democratic. We have elections for our federal or nationwide government, our provincial and territorial governments, and our local and municipal governments. We're also a constitutional monarchy, so I mentioned this before, so we retain our ties to Britain. The Queen is our head of state. She's primarily a figurehead at this point, but she does actually still need to sign Canadian laws into effect. It would be unheard of for her to challenge any laws, but essentially she is still there. And then from a political perspective, we have 3 major political parties within Canada. So that's the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party, which tend to be the 2 dominant parties, at least at the federal level. There's also the NDP, the New Democratic Party. And then in addition to that, there's 3 smaller parties. So we've got the Green Party, the Bloc Québécois, primarily from Quebec, and then a relatively new party called the People's Party of Canada. But again, at the federal level, tends to be either a Liberal government or a Conservative government, with the other one just being the opposition. And it's important to note that what we call liberal and conservative is actually generally quite central. So we're not, typically veering too far to the left or too far to the right. We tend to keep things right in the middle. So we have pretty good political stability here within Canada. In terms of our human rights, there is some key legislation that is important to be aware of. So we do have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is part of our Constitution. It governs all the other rights within Canada. We also have the Human Rights Act, which governs for Canadians who are employed by the federal government or who are dealing with the federal government, the fact that their rights must be respected. And then in addition to that, each province and territory has its own human rights laws and codes. And this really has to do with businesses interacting with customers and employees. So this is something that's taken very seriously within Canada, this emphasis on human rights. And if a business is found to not be respecting, whether it's a customer or an employee's rights and freedoms, there can be some pretty strong consequences, and there are ways for people to report that. I don't profess to be a lawyer. I know we have a lawyer coming.
We
You are on mute right now.
Erin, I guess you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, that's fun. Sorry about that. Where did I leave off? What was the last thing that everyone heard?
You were talking about
when you were talking about the lawyer. You are not a lawyer.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, so I don't, I can't give specific legal advice on this, but as a business owner, you do want to be aware of this and just make sure you're on the right side of any human rights legislation.
Yeah, and we will have a module where a lawyer is joining us to guide you through that as well.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to keep moving along. If anyone has any questions on anything that's being presented, feel free to jump in. Just interrupt me or raise your hand. Maybe Vivi can ping me if you've got any questions.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah.
The part of the immigration, that point is very, very important for you guys. As Colombia, we don't have a huge influx of immigrants, or like, let's say our customer and companies composition is very homogeneous compared to Canada. And this is important for you to kind of like make a mental note, right? Like we are Canadians, but at the same time, culturally, we are very diverse. And that is important when you are kind of like mapping your consumer research, right? All right. Thank you, Erin.
Okay. So now that we know a little bit more about Canada as a country, let's take a look at Canadians themselves and get a better feel for who they are.
Erin, I guess Gabriel has a question. Gabriel, you had your hand.
Yes, please. Well, it's more like outside the law. I'm just curious about this, how the Colombian is treated in Canada. I mean, in most of the countries, we are the mafia and stuff like that, no? You know, but in Canada, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I can certainly speak to that, and then Vivi, you might want to jump in as well with your own experience. So from my perspective as a Canadian, I think, again, most Canadians are very open-minded. So, you know, just because you say, oh, I come from Colombia or I'm working in Colombia, you know, it doesn't necessarily come off with a, you know, oh, therefore you must be a horrible person, you know, you must be up to bad things. You know, it doesn't, we wouldn't judge you as a person. I mean, certainly, you know, when the average Canadian hears the word Colombia, you know, all they typically know about the country overall is you know, some of the history and the violence and maybe the not so nice things. Again, as a generalization, but that wouldn't necessarily translate to you as a person. Most people will, you know, will not put those two things together and say, oh, because you're from there, therefore, you know, you must be involved in that. That's really not the case. And again, there are some people who are even more educated, I would say, about Colombia as a country as well, you know, fairly well traveled. So you might even encounter a number of people who are even more knowledgeable over and above the stereotype.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was asking is just because, you know, in business that I think is a very important point, because if I'm going to open a business in Canada and that point is against me, you know, so I'm gonna find a very strong wall. But if it, like you say, if it's not strong in that way, well, I think I have a chance.
Yes.
We have a chance.
Canadians are fairly open-minded, as Erin said. Sometimes you get the remarks of our history, and don't get me wrong, like those you get, but it doesn't reflect on you doing business or you working in here, right? Okay. Like our experience has always been very open-minded, and they respect and value a lot the experience you bring to the table and the value you bring to the table. So I haven't had any issues before being a Colombian entrepreneur and a Colombian open in the workforce, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Diego, okay. You also have your hand raised.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Gabriel.
Was there another question, or?
Yes, Diego Sanchez has his hand raised. If you're on mute, we cannot hear you. He may be having trouble, so maybe, Erin, you can continue, and maybe later we can catch up with him.
Sure, sounds good. Okay. So I think I alluded to this earlier with the geography section, but we have a primarily urban population in Canada. So 80% of Canadians live in cities, and the major cities in Canada include Toronto, which is in the province of Ontario, you know, kind of central east in Canada. We've got the city of Montreal in the province of Quebec, primarily French-speaking province, slightly to the east of Ontario. We've got the city of Calgary in the province of Alberta, which is more towards the western side of Canada. And then towards the far west of Canada, we have the city of Vancouver. And last but certainly not least, we've got the city of Ottawa. Not necessarily one of the largest of the bunch, but because Ottawa is our capital city, it's still fairly significant.
Erin?
Hello.
Okay, I solved my problems. Okay. Will we have access to this presentation?
Yes, I believe Vivi's recording it, and she'll send the slides as well.
Okay, yes, it is.
Great. All right. Another interesting thing to note about Canadians is the majority of Canadians have some kind of post-secondary education, so some kind of formal education beyond high school. I believe we're actually one of the most highly educated countries in the world, so that sort of plays in, when you're thinking about the tech industry, we have a very highly skilled and knowledgeable workforce really kind of pushing that industry forward. In terms of earnings, Canadians earn approximately $3.3 thousand US per month. And so when you hear that kind of a figure, the immediate reaction might be, oh, that's a lot of money, but there are some things to be aware of. So the cost of living in Canada is quite high. And we also do pay a fair amount of our income in taxes. So I found this statistic from 2018. The average Canadian family pays about 44% of their income in taxes. So again, it's just something to bear in mind. We do have a fair amount of disposable income, but it's not the same as, say, you might see in the US, for example. From the technology side of things, about 87% of the Canadian population accessed the internet last year. So again, there's really no issue reaching Canadians digitally. And then also from a mobile perspective, LTE networks are available to pretty much all Canadians. And then also our mobile connection speeds are 287% faster than the global average. So what this means when thinking about reaching Canadians or developing solutions for the Canadian market, mobile really needs to be a big part of the equation. It's an ever increasing sort of slice of the pie in terms of how Canadians are accessing information. All right. So now that we know a little bit more about Canadians overall, let's take a look at the business culture in Canada. And one of the things I really kind of want to hammer home on this slide is Canadians are actually, in a lot of ways, fairly different from Americans, both from a business culture perspective and from a consumer perspective. And I just think it's important to appreciate this because it will help, increase your chance of success when you're doing business in Canada. So I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to switch over to YouTube. I have a very, very short clip that I think really sort of encapsulates this. And this was from a commercial that aired back in the 1990s. It's actually a beer commercial, but it was widely popular in Canada because it really sort of tapped into some of our deep-seated feelings about being compared to Americans. So I'll just take a moment, cut over, and roll this clip, and then we'll come back and continue on with the slide. Okay. Can everyone see YouTube?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Actually, hold on. I need to make sure my computer audio is coming in with that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
There we go. All right. Just shout if you're not able to hear this.
Hey, I'm not a lumberjack or a fur trader, and I don't live in an igloo or eat blubber or own a dog sled. And I don't know Jimmy, Sally, or Susie from Canada, although I'm certain they're really, really nice. I have a prime minister, not a president. I speak English and French, not American, and I pronounce it about, not a boot. I can proudly sew my country's flag on my backpack. I believe in peacekeeping, not policing.
diversity, not assimilation, and that the beaver is a truly proud and noble animal. A toque is a hat, a Chesterfield is a pouch, and it is pronounced Zed, not Z-Z. Canada is the second largest landmass, the first nation of hockey, and the best part of North America. My name is Joe, and I am Canadian.
Thank you.
That's actually really funny.
I think we understood.
I just needed to get that off my chest. So again, I think this sort of encapsulates it a little bit. I don't want to create the impression that, you know, Canadians have a really negative view of Americans or we hate Americans or anything like that, but it's just about understanding that there are a few things that do make us unique, even compared to our next door neighbors. So this first point here, I'm sure this is probably what you would all associate when you think of Canadians. So the words modest, polite,
Erin,
patient.
can you go back to presenter mode?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was sharing. My apologies.
I guess you're sharing the wrong screen and the wrong screen. Go back to your previous screen. Thank you. No, amiga, you're sharing your notes once more.
Sorry, what are you
we can see your screen, Erin, but it's not in presentation mode. Can you just go to presentation mode in the PowerPoint, please?
Oh, very strange. I am. Let me try closing it. I'll try this again. Try closing this.
Probably you need to share another screen.
Here we go.
It's okay. No.
Working now?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Sorry about that. So patient, reserved. You may have heard we like to use the word sorry a lot, even if we're not really apologizing. So I think this is what most people perceive about Canadians. And sometimes it seems like we're very cold or we're very quiet. But really from a Canadian perspective, it's more about like not being boastful or loud or bragging or in your face. Like we tend to be a little bit more laid back and sort of like more in control of our emotions. And this is kind of interesting. It's both a good thing and a bad thing because on the one hand, you know, this can sort of make things smoother in business. So maybe there's, you know, not as many heated arguments, you know, but then on the other hand, when it comes to Canadians really getting out there and selling ourselves and selling products and services, that's not necessarily a Canadian strong point to go ahead and, you know, kind of beat our own drum, so to speak. So anyways, again, I do think this is something that's unique about Canadians. I alluded to this on the previous slide. So Canadians are very accepting of others. And this doesn't only have to do with, you know, backgrounds, races, sexual orientations, religions. You know, it's not just that, but it's also about different opinions as well. So when you're doing business, you know, it's okay to have a difference of opinion on something. You can discuss something, you know, say, oh, I disagree, you know, go back and forth. At the end of the day, someone might need to make a final decision, but it doesn't get really sort of personal and emotional and involved. It's sort of just agree to disagree, you know, respect each other's point of view and move on. Canadians really value their privacy. So again, this kind of plays into the stereotype of us being like really cold and like standoffish. But it just takes a little bit more time, I would say, to get to know a Canadian. So the first time you meet someone, they're not necessarily going to come right out and, you know, tell you all about their wife and their kids and where they grew up and where they got married. And it's just, we kind of tend to hold back a little bit, you know, and take a little bit more time to know someone fully. And in the context of business, you know, you might never fully know the personal lives of your customers or your coworkers or your partners in Canada. Sometimes there can be a hard line drawn between business and family or business and friendships. It really depends on the organization. Like in some cases, it's a little more blurred, and you know, you work with your colleagues and your friends outside of work. In other cases, it's a very, very clear line of basically people come in, do business, and go home, and that's kind of where it is. So sometimes you just need to figure out, you know, where the other person or where this organization is you know, comfortable, and you know, where that line is drawn. And also I would say just kind of be cautious about getting too personal or asking too many personal things too quickly. Canadians are very punctual and deadline driven, especially in business. There's a little bit more sort of leniency on a social aspect. But especially in business, if you have key meetings or deadlines, you need to make sure you're there on time or you're delivering on time. There isn't a lot of tolerance for being late. I mean, not to say that it never happens. You know, we've got traffic too. You know, it does happen. But again, if you're doing something important and you want to have a chance of success, you know, do everything you can to make sure you're punctual and you're delivering on time. In the Canadian workplace, seniority is certainly respected, but it's not sort of the final line. So, you know, unlike some other cultures, it is okay to question your supervisor. You know, have a bit of a discussion with them. It's not a total yes culture, and many businesses have very flat hierarchies. But at the end of the day, often the title also goes along with, you know, the amount of experience the person has gained. So there does have to be a little bit of respect for that. Like if they're saying this is the direction we're going, you can question, you can have a discussion, but ultimately, you know, if they say it, that's probably the direction it's going. When it comes to business decision making, Canadians really do have a stronger emphasis on facts in business decisions. So I don't want to say that, you know, interpersonal relationships don't matter at all in business. They absolutely do. But for, you know, comparing against competitors, if there's a competitor coming in with a really strong value proposition, you know, a better offering at a better price, it would be difficult to justify choosing something else just based on an interpersonal relationship. Not to say that it never happens, and again, relationship is also important with regards to how entrenched a vendor is with a customer. So if you're already offering them several products and services, you know, it makes sense for them to, you know, to stay with you, right? So from that perspective, it matters, but the interpersonal piece is not necessarily going to be one of the key decision factors. Along this line, though, Canadian decision makers definitely don't appreciate bragging or, you know, kind of saying you can do everything, claiming you can do the moon and the stars. They kind of start to get a little bit suspicious or nervous, you know, thinking that you might not be able to deliver. So definitely be careful if you're pitching a proposal or a concept. You want to have this idea of under promise, over deliver. So don't go in there saying, you know, you can do all these things and then, you know, have your customer find out later that you can't deliver on them. It's best to just be cautious, be realistic, be pragmatic. And then if it turns out that you beat their expectations, that's even better. But just you know, be careful about not being perceived as bragging. So I think at this point we'll maybe take a bit of a pause. I'm curious. So I'm sure some of you coming in here had some ideas already about Canadian culture. So I'd be interested to hear, you know, how this maybe compares with what your ideas are. If there's anything else you're curious about that I haven't covered. And also, I think we did have some attendees here who are either living in Canada or have lived in Canada. So it would be interesting to hear your perspectives as well. How does this kind of align with what you're seeing?
So far, from my point of view, as a Colombian Canadian, it has hit a point, and it did create like some points of adjustments when I immigrated to Canada like 10 years ago. Like, yes, it is very different from American culture. and you just kind of adjust to how the Canadian thinks, especially one that comes from a very warm culture of and very, let's say, friendly and unapologetic kind of culture. It kind of you learn along the way how Canadians react to those types of things. But yeah, especially the punctuality and their privacy, right? Like it's not as warm. But it doesn't mean that they are not open-minded. Like, yeah. So far, I am okay. I am okay with all of your points from my experience.
Erin, hi. I wanted to jump in and participate here.
Hello.
My name is Luis Avellaneda. I actually am part of the team of ProColombia here in Canada. I'm based in Toronto.
Great.
And I've been here for the last 2 years and a half now.
Excellent.
So, yeah, from my experience, I would say like what you've mentioned is as it is. Like I would say here, it is more important to focus on developing a professional relationship before jumping to create a personal one. Like first, you would need to gain the trust from your counterpart, and afterwards, I mean, they open your door to. I mean, if they want to have like a more personal approach, then go for it. I mean, for example, in Colombia or even in Mexico, in Latin cultures, maybe is the opposite. You start the relationship being friends and maybe partying, and afterwards you say, okay, so how's business? yeah, it happens. So yeah, I mean, about the deadline driven, I mean, something that you value, and I've realized this is like being super responsive and attentive, and of course deliver as promised. So yeah, I agree with what you've said, and I wanted to share that with the audience.
Great, thanks. I really appreciate it.
Diego, I see your hand.
Okay, yes. I just have another question. So, from culture perspective, Canadian culture is a high context culture or a low context culture?
Oh, geez, you're quizzing my previous organizational behavior skills. Can you elaborate on high context versus low context?
So high context is that before you start a meeting, you started talking about a lot of things and start rounding different aspects before you go to the specific point. Mm-hmm. But a low context is, okay, we start the meeting, we go directly forward to the point. Mm-hmm. So that kind of situation. So Japanese culture is a high context culture. Mm-hmm. Colombian culture is a high mm-hmm. level context culture, but I don't know about Canadians.
We are definitely low context.
Yeah.
I will I will let Erin.
So that means that you go directly to the point.
Yes, that's what I would say. For the majority of meetings, there might be a little bit of preamble or, hi, how are you kind of thing, but really just kind of diving right in is mostly the norm. It does depend a little bit on the type of meeting, I will say. Like, again, I think as a blanket statement, absolutely Canada would be low context. I think there are some types of meetings. So for example, if you're having a team meeting at work, depends on the team, but a lot of team kind of internal meetings tend to be a little less formal. People might talk about things not related to the agenda, not related to business, in that kind of a setting. But if you were, say, to meet with a customer or, present to a management team on a particular topic, generally speaking, there wouldn't be, a ton of preamble going into that. You kind of, say hi, maybe a little brief, how's the weather? Canadians love to talk about the weather. That's one thing I should have mentioned, oh, it's snowing again, and away we go, right? So very kind of brief and to the point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. All right.
May I add something, Vivi?
Yes, of course.
So, hey, I'm Juan. In my short experience in Canada in 10 years, I've worked, I think, like in 10 companies so far. And what I can tell you is like resonates with both sides. So first, there is a... Sorry.
Juan, we lost you.
So sorry about that. So what I was saying is there is two parts of that story. The first one is depends on the culture of the company. It's how those things will happen. But in general, what I've seen is that no one likes meetings in Canada. So we have a ton of them, but we don't like them. So what I've seen happening over and over in these companies is that beforehand what is going to be the reason for the meeting, whether it's an informal meeting or a formal one, and you already have the agenda in advance. So that makes all the difference. There is a little bit of preamble usually, like Erin was telling you about, but in general it goes to the point and it tries to be as brief as possible. And now, after COVID, the whole idea is to let's go to the point, get the information that we need, and let's move along because people need their time. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Juan. And thanks for the question. Is there anything else before we move on? Okay. So now we know a bit more about the business culture. Let's take a look at things from the Canadian consumer perspective. So first of all, when we look at e-commerce, most Canadian consumers are very comfortable online. They do a lot of research online before they make a purchasing decision. But still, in the majority of cases, most consumers tend to prefer some kind of a hybrid model. So whether they research online and then go to a store to make their final purchase decision, or whether they purchase online but then go to a local store to pick up their order, like a click and collect. So that's really where a lot of Canadian consumers are still at. Obviously, with COVID, this is kind of completely, thrown things upside down in terms of e-commerce. Really accelerated it. And in general, even prior to that, e-commerce was really taking off in Canada. But I think we'll focus a little more on that once we get to the topic on technology trends. But going hand in hand with this, Canadians are kind of fussy. We do sort of expect a very high quality experience when making a purchase decision. So this can refer to the in-store experience, but really where this comes into play is the online experience, from browsing to selecting to payment, order tracking, and delivery, if that applies. Increasingly, we're becoming, less patient if there's any sort of issues along the way. And it's very easy to lose a customer to a competitor, just have a customer give up if that experience is in any way sort of, problematic. And also there's a trust factor here as well. So Canadians are fairly cautious about where they're buying from, especially when they're buying online. So having that high quality user experience, that really nice interface, it's associated with being trustworthy, being reliable, being professional. They know they're going to get a good experience and they can trust you with whatever data's being provided as well. Canadians are kind of known to be penny pinchers, or maybe if I put it a little more nicely, I'll say value conscious. So we really do expect good value for money. And we do tend to be a little more price sensitive than, say, what you might see in the US. So a lot of us do really kind of focus on that, bang for the buck when it comes to making a purchase. But I don't want to give the impression that like having the lowest price is the only thing that matters for Canadian consumers. So increasingly, many Canadians are becoming very concerned about corporate social responsibility. So everything from where the product is sourced from, whose labor is going into it, are they being paid a living wage, what's the environmental impact, does the business care about the local community? So really in the contrast to what I just said of, we just care about the dollars, this is where Canadians are actually willing to pay a little bit of a price premium for products and services that they feel do kind of align with their values and what they care about in terms of corporate social responsibility. On a similar note, many Canadians are increasingly supportive of local and small businesses. So I would say a lot of Canadians really have a love-hate relationship with Amazon, Costco, Walmart. So on the one hand, we all go there, we all go there to get our milk and our eggs and our toilet paper, and we appreciate the value that they bring. However, a lot of Canadians are also very aware of some of the negative impacts that these mega retailers can have on the economy and on entrepreneurs, and they don't want entrepreneurs to be completely decimated. They like to support the underdog. So again, I don't want to totally avoid this whole kind of local notion, but I think what to take away of this is just to be aware that it exists and to find ways to work within this. So whether it's partnering with local Canadian businesses, whether it's helping local Canadian businesses market their products and services, tell the stories of their products and services, whether it's focusing on marketing strategies that have an emphasis on understanding local characteristics, or just emphasizing more on entrepreneurship or the CSR aspects of the business. I think the point is just to find ways to work within this trend, as opposed to just kind of being completely unaware of it. On a kind of unrelated note, Canadians are becoming more health conscious. So nutrition, fitness, medical devices, definitely wearables and health data. This is definitely going to be a booming segment over the next several years. Lots of baby boomers aging, getting more and more concerned about their health. So this is going to be a significantly increasing part of the market for Canada. And then last but not least, emphasis on DIY. So traditionally, Canadians have been very self-sufficient, whether it's cooking, cleaning, even for home renovations. Like a lot of us are kind of like, do-it-ourselfers. However, from my perspective, I do think this is kind of at the point of changing. So life is getting more hectic, our jobs are getting more hectic. So there's, you can see things popping up in the market. Like, for example, meal kits are becoming a really popular idea where you get your ingredients and your recipes delivered to your door. You still cook your own meals, but it's just helping you out a little bit with the, saving some time and not having to buy groceries. So I think that's a good example of, we're still doing it ourselves, but, we're looking for a little bit of help along the way. So just something to be aware of, that, this kind of DIY mentality might be shifting a little bit as our lives become more hectic. And bearing this in mind, I did want to call to your attention probably the most famous example of a failure entering into Canada, and that is Target Canada. And Target is a major US retailer, pretty similar to a Walmart, but a little bit higher end. And many Canadians already had a really good impression of Target because, a lot of us live so close to the US. We've gone to the US, gone shopping, and really, really enjoyed the experience at Target. So when Target came to enter Canada, they really had a lot of good, sort of positive vibes coming into it, but they somehow sort of managed to destroy that. So when they entered Canada, they had a number of failures. It wasn't just about, failing to understand Canadian consumers. They also had issues with technology and supply chain and training. But one of the biggest issues was a failure to understand and sort of respect Canadian consumers. So when Canadians came into the Targets at launch, they found empty store shelves. The retail locations were nowhere near as nice as what they had seen in the US. The pricing was significantly higher, even when you take into account the exchange rate and the tax. And the product selection as well was just not kind of up to what Canadians were expecting. So in the end, Target ended up pulling out of Canada. And again, there was many factors that led to this, but I think one of the biggest ones was not kind of trying to understand their consumer a little bit more. And I don't want this to be, you know, like a total negative, but this is just kind of an example of, you know, what not to do so that we can make sure we're doing things right when we're thinking about our products and services for the Canadian market. So this first article here is just, if you're curious after the fact, it's a little bit of history on what happened. Whoops. And then the second article is a recent article where they're actually attempting to come back into Canada via the e-commerce route. So interesting reading if you have some time later on. I think in the interest of time, well, let's go ahead with the discussion, and then if need be, I'll make up some time afterwards. So based on what we've talked about so far, I'm just wondering if anything's kind of percolating right now. Like, I know it's still a little bit, you know, early stage, but is there anything you're starting to see jump out at you right away that you're thinking, I might need to tweak my business strategy or my marketing strategy, kind of thinking about some of these factors? Okay. I think it's still early stages, so that's all right. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I think, again, as you go through some of the upcoming modules, I think this will really start to solidify.
I have a question, Erin. Excuse me for interrupt you. Are the Canadian goal-oriented or time-oriented?
Can I say both? I would say both. I would say it tends to be pretty context specific. Yeah, I would say both. I would say if I had to pick one, I might pick goal oriented. But I think it really depends on the project. So I've definitely seen projects where, you know, there was just some urgency, some driver to get it out on a particular timeline, you know, even though, you know, it might not be meeting all the objectives or everything that was intended. So I've definitely seen situations where time was the overriding factor. But then I have seen other situations where it's kind of the bigger picture, you know, objective that matters most. I don't know, Vivi or Juan, if you have any personal experience you'd like to share with that.
It will depend on the type of corporation, right? Like I guess larger corporations are more goal-oriented than time-oriented because obviously their budget. But when you have small, medium companies, they are a combination of both, like keeping themselves honest and on track, and setting really tight and structured goals that are most achievable, right? It's less in the air, more target, right? So it would depend obviously on the type of corporation.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
On my end, what I would say is that what they do value, it's not only these two things, but communication. So timely communication, being able to know what needs to happen or why the timeline is being affected or why the deliverable is going to change. That's what matters. Mm-hmm. One thing that Canadians don't like is surprises.
So do you want to be predictive?
Yes.
Yeah.
Predictable.
That is
predictable. Okay.
Every
absolutely.
meeting that I'm involved in, it doesn't matter what kind of project. I've worked with government, private, small and big. It's all. It's about sorry about that. It's about having a visibility of what is happening. It's always the same. We want to know always where we are, what things may drop or why it's getting affected and on why, so we can make timely decisions. That's the norm every time.
Yep, that's a really good point. Thanks, Juan. And thanks for the question.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
Great.
Hi, Erin.
Hello.
Hi. I just want to tell you something about the question that you made before.
Okay.
About the marketing strategy. I had some problems with my internet connection, but I but I understood the question at the end of that. So,
okay, great.
What worries me just a little bit is that you said about that the Canadian support like a local business. So I work for a tech company specialist in tech talent. So we develop like whatever digital project through Colombian talent. Yeah. So that is what worries me just for a while, because I take the advantages of that based on principal on cost, yeah, the low cost. But the problem is that if you support more the local business, that could be a trouble for me.
Thanks. That's a great question. So I think what I would say on that is, from my perspective, first of all, I think the buy local trend tends to be more kind of consumer side, as opposed to, you know, a business who might be hiring talent. So that's one thing. You know, it's really more about, I think, the consumer perspective on this, and saying, oh, can I go to a local shop or a local market and, you know, support this little entrepreneur. And again, I think it's also, you know, it's a factor that might play in, but I don't think it's the be all and end all. Like, again, if you're offering a really compelling offering, you know, with a compelling price, you know, lots of experience, you know, you can show your credentials, especially in a business to business setting. I think that would be kind of a more critical factor from my perspective. Are there any other perspectives on that?
Yeah, Victor here. I wanted to add something, and this has been my experience working here in Canada as Colombian immigrant. So, for example, what I did at the beginning when I created my company, I had just like the same concern that you were exposing. Like, all the people that works with me works from Colombia. I'm the only one that is in Canada. So I was thinking that the market wasn't going to accept my product or my project delivery for that reason. But the most important thing first is what Erin mentioned before, and Juan as well. If you are if you have a good product, and if you communicate with the client in a proper way, in a clean way, with a good language, and they understand everything from the beginning, you will have no problem. So it doesn't matter if you're Colombian or from anywhere on the world. If you have your project like well-based and you know what you are offering, they will accept it right away.
Absolutely. Thanks. That's a great point.
Thanks a lot.
Alejandro has his hand raised. Alejandro?
Hi, guys. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to ask you for which are like the top, you will say that the top 5 cities for incorporating in Canada, taking into account human resources, taking into account talent, taxes, everything.
So I think we've got that coming up, at least from a tech perspective. So some of the really, you know, interesting and up and coming sectors from the technology standpoint. So I think we'll cover off on that in the upcoming slides. So let's take a look, and then if there's any further questions after that, then we can certainly discuss.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I think in the interest of time, I'll move along. So this is really getting into the heart of it now. So the Canadian tech industry overview. So if you read articles about the technology industry in Canada, you'll often hear different cities in Canada or Canada overall referred to as the Silicon Valley of the North. And I think this really just sort of demonstrates how hot the tech industry is in Canada by these, you know, kind of ongoing comparisons to Silicon Valley in the United States. And I think some of the numbers really speak for themselves. So in 2019, the information technology sector generated $210 billion in revenue. And that represents a 30% revenue growth from 2013 through to 2019. And on several different aspects, the tech industry is outperforming other sectors in Canada. So again, I think in terms of the overall opportunity in the industry here, the numbers really do stand out. Another thing that sort of bodes well for the tech sector in Canada is the strong government interest and support in both technology and entrepreneurship. And this can be seen through several initiatives, the first of which is the Innovation Supercluster Initiative. And this is a $950 million initiative to invest in innovation in specific regions and segments in Canada and bring together post-secondary institutions, small to medium-sized businesses, and other for-profit players, and bring them together to really accelerate innovation. So this may be interesting as well when you're thinking of some of the key areas to incorporate or to do business in Canada. So just to name them, the 5 superclusters are the Digital Technology Supercluster, which is in British Columbia, the Protein Industry Supercluster in the Prairie Provinces. We have Next Generation Manufacturing in Ontario. There's a Scale AI Supercluster, and that's in Quebec. And then there's an Ocean Supercluster, which is based in the Atlantic provinces. So again, if any of those sound interesting or relevant to your industry and your business, you may want to do more research on each of those areas. In addition to this, there's a program, the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Incentive Program. And this provides tax benefits to Canadian companies, I believe even foreign-controlled Canadian companies, although with a lesser benefit, who are performing research and development within Canada. There's also the Industrial Research Assistance Program, which is for Canadian small to medium businesses of less than 500 employees. And this gives financial contributions towards salaries or contractors to help advance technology projects. And in addition to some of these incentives, there are, again, specific provincial and even regional incentives that may be of interest. So again, depending on your entry strategy and where you're thinking of doing business in Canada, these more sort of local incentives may be applicable for you. So again, not all of these may apply depending on your strategy when you set up your business structure in Canada. But I think the bottom line here is really to show the strong government interest in sort of supporting and fostering and growing this industry, which benefits all of us. So with that, let's move ahead and take a look at some of the specific regions in Canada that have really booming local tech economies and some of their key characteristics. So the first city I want to call out is the city of Toronto. So this is Canada's most populous city. And it's also surrounded by several major suburban cities as well that together make up what's known as the GTA, or the Greater Toronto Area. A few of the major universities in Toronto of note include the University of Toronto, as well as Ryerson University. There's several incubators and accelerators in Toronto, some of which include the Mars Innovation Hub, which I believe is primarily focused on health, but I think there's other branches as well in clean tech and financial tech. There's the DMZ, which is a leading accelerator for startups, and it has a relationship with Ryerson University. And then there's also Creative Destruction Labs, which is associated with the University of Toronto. And they're a nonprofit program for seed stage science and technology companies. And just to name a few of the tech players in Toronto that you might have heard of. So one of them is Autodesk, the makers of AutoCAD. We've got Uber there, Ecobee, who makes smart home devices, and Wattpad, which is a leading global community for writers and readers. So again, not all of these companies certainly were founded in Toronto, but it does show that they have confidence in the tech sector in Toronto, and we're interested in doing business there. And if you'd like to learn more about the tech industry in Toronto, there's a link there you'll be able to access. Next up, we have Montreal, which is in the primarily French-speaking province of Quebec. While most people in Montreal speak French, a vast majority of them also speak English as well. So if you don't speak French, don't worry. You can generally get around with English doing business there. Montreal is really known for work in visual effects, animation, video game design, digital marketing as well. So they do kind of have a bit of a niche going there. And some of the major universities in Montreal include McGill University, the University of Montreal, and Concordia. There's a couple of key incubators and accelerators I'd like to call out. So one of them is the Founders Institute Montreal branch. So the Founders Institute is the world's largest pre-seed startup accelerator, and they have a chapter in Montreal. And then there's also Tandem Launch, who work with entrepreneurs to build businesses based around university technology. And some of the key players in Montreal who you might have heard of include Electronic Arts and Ubisoft. So again, both major video game producers, as well as the Motion Picture Company. So they are a global visual effects company. And again, if you're interested in learning more about the tech sector in Montreal, I've got a link here for you. Next up is Ottawa. So obviously Canada's capital. It's nowhere near as large as Toronto, but it is still a major tech hub within Canada. It's also a little bit further north of Toronto, so you would definitely see more snow and colder temperatures. And some of the major universities and colleges in Ottawa include the University of Ottawa, Carleton University, and Algonquin College. A couple of the key incubators and accelerators include Bayview Yards, who call themselves Ottawa's one-stop business acceleration shop, as well as the Startup Garage, which is a 4-month pre-accelerator program, and I believe they have a relationship with the University of Ottawa. And some of the interesting players in Ottawa include Corel Corporation, the makers of Corel Draw, and they are actually a Canadian company and they are headquartered in Ottawa. There's Kinaxis, which is a Canadian supply chain software company, and probably a name that we're all familiar with, so Shopify. So Shopify is an e-commerce solutions provider, and they are also actually headquartered in Ottawa and are currently Canada's largest public company. And again, I have a link there for you for more information. The cities of Kitchener and Waterloo, which is where I'm located, they're immediately beside each other in the province of Ontario. They're part of what's known as the Toronto-Waterloo Tech Corridor. So this is the largest tech cluster in North America outside of Silicon Valley. And they're also the fastest growing tech market in Canada. Some of the major universities and colleges in KW, Kitchener-Waterloo, include the University of Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier, and Conestoga College. Some of the major incubators and accelerators include the Accelerator Center, which is an award-winning startup accelerator, Communitech, which is an industry-led innovation center and one of the world's fastest-growing tech ecosystems, as well as Velocity, which is an incubator for early-stage pre-seed technology startups, and they're associated with the University of Waterloo. Again, some of the big names you might recognize. So we've got BlackBerry, or formerly known as Research in Motion. They're founded and headquartered in Waterloo. We've got OpenText, which is also founded and headquartered in Waterloo, and they are a major global enterprise information management company. And Google, I think that speaks for itself. And again, if you're interested in Kitchener-Waterloo in particular, I've got a link here for you to start your research. And last but not least, we have the city of Vancouver. So Vancouver is a coastal city in the southwest corner of Canada in the province of British Columbia. Some of the key universities and colleges in Vancouver include the University of British Columbia, Simon Fraser University, and the British Columbia Institute of Technology. Some of the key incubators and accelerators include the BC Tech Hub, which is an event and co-working space to bring innovators together. And there's also a chapter of the Founders Institute in Vancouver as well. Some of the key players you might know in Vancouver include Hootsuite. So that's a social media management platform that is founded and headquartered in Vancouver. Slack, which I'm sure you all know, and they were actually founded in Vancouver. And again, I'm sure you're all aware they've recently been purchased by Salesforce, and then Salesforce itself has a very strong presence in Vancouver as well. And again, for more information about the tech industry in Canada, I've got a link. So with that, I'll just do a very quick wrap up. I know we're running a little bit short on time, and then we can move on and see if there's any further questions. So I hope this has helped to start to shed some light on Canada as a country, some of the business culture and consumer traits in Canada. And I hope this has got everyone thinking about the significant opportunity that exists in the tech industry in Canada. We've really got a very strong formula of, university research coming together with incubators and accelerators to support entrepreneurship, and the strong government support and interest in really growing the industry. So with that, I'll just close the presentation, and I will leave the floor open for any questions, comments, anything else that anyone would like to share.
Erin, this is Pedro from Smart JSP.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. So I have a couple of questions. 5 years ago, more or less, we used to provide IT services in Vancouver, in British Columbia. Mm-hmm. I am also Canadian citizen, and I was leading my company there, let's say, for 2-3 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. And if I were, let's say, sharing these services on site, it was perfect. But as soon as we were trying to have something more flexible, combining remote services, things like that, I noticed that the market was a bit conservative, sometimes because they were afraid of privacy issues. So they prefer to have local providers, or they prefer to have companies with local presence. I know that in the previous years, some of these situations maybe has been changing. So I am interested, how is that happening right now, especially with all this pandemic? Because now I guess that most of the companies, they are forced to be more open-minded with remote consultants. Yes. And especially if you don't have the opportunity all the time to be in the special place on site or something like that. Yeah, so I just want to validate that. And how different is that from the English-speaking provinces? When you compare that one from Quebec, for example, is in terms of how flexible are they to work with the people with remote IT services, with this kind of security issues that they have in mind sometimes, that everything have to be there. So yeah, how is that one happening right now?
Yep, that's a great question. Thanks for that question. So I think to tackle some of the security and privacy pieces first. So again, that will be kind of at the forefront of any decision maker's mind in Canada when they're looking to procure a product or a service. It will be a big factor. So I think the main thing you can do there, if that's impacting your business, is to be extremely knowledgeable. So extremely knowledgeable about any particular legal requirements that impact your industry, or particularly knowledgeable about any potential security threats that impact that industry, and just sort of do anything you can to assure the customer that they will be receiving the utmost in privacy compliance and security compliance. So I think that's really the key, is just being knowledgeable, professional, and being able to reasonably assure the customer that everything is solid. If you can do that, I think that kind of takes the location a little bit out of the equation. Again, there are, I would say, obviously some organizations are more sensitive about that. Certainly government agencies, or agencies dealing with healthcare data or national defense data, of course, they're going to have heightened requirement there, but you know, I think for most companies, as long as you can, you know, be aware of the facts and assure them that you're providing a reliable and secure service, that should be sufficient.
And also being compliant with the law. If they require certain certifications, or if they require that you have certain like papers in place, to have those available, right, upon request. I think that would be the most important, right?
Absolutely.
Juan Jose, you have your hand.
I think there was a second aspect to that question too. I think it was also to do with the, you know, working remotely versus working on site, and how in the past that might have been a barrier where it's, you know, oh, we can't have someone come on site. You know, has that changed with the pandemic? I would say almost certainly. And we are going to get into this a little bit when we talk about the technology trends in Canada as well. But the pandemic has completely, you know, shifted everyone's mindset in terms of working remotely. It kind of didn't matter almost where you were coming from pre-pandemic, whether you were more on that conservative side or whether, you know, you and your organization was more on that, you know, anybody can work anywhere side. You know, post-pandemic, you know, even after the vaccines roll out and you know, we're all able to go back, I do not foresee there being a shift to, you know, needing to come back on site. I think this whole concept of being able to work remotely and virtually, I think that's pretty well entrenched and pretty well demonstrated from what's been happening with the pandemic. So I do think in some ways that might, you know, be a little bit of an opportunity to say, hey, you know, people have been working now for essentially a year totally remotely, and you know, things have been functioning. You know, the sky hasn't fallen, so you know, we can certainly do our jobs and do what we need to do, you know, to ensure we're delivering regardless of location.
Thank you.
Now, Juan Jose, you have your hand raised.
Okay, thank you. Well, Juan Jose from Mitsaya. You show us some of the most important cities of Canada, but we have a special interest in Calgary. We want to know if you can show us or tell us about if there is any important opportunities for technological companies to move there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't have a really strong background with Calgary. I mean, it certainly is one of Canada's major cities, and there certainly is, you know, a tech industry there that would be interesting to pursue, I think. I do think there are some things to bear in mind with Calgary. So again, I think just in Alberta as a whole, there is kind of a stronger emphasis on oil and gas, and there have been some challenges in the oil and gas sector that's kind of rippling down to Alberta's economy as a whole. Again, I don't want to paint, you know, a totally gloomy picture. I do still think there's opportunity in Calgary, and again, depending on, you know, your business and what you're interested in, there may you know, still be a particular niche there where you can be successful. So I wouldn't totally take it off the table. But it's, you know, maybe not in kind of the top 5 that was presented, and B, just be a little bit aware of the economy in Alberta overall when you're thinking about that. I don't know if there's anyone else who has any direct experience. Vivi or Juan, do you have any experience dealing with the tech sector in Alberta?
No, the tech sector is more to support like more traditional types of businesses, like as you said, oil and gas industry, and also farming. So it's more the customer-oriented type of technologies. So if your company is trying to target oil and gas industry or the farming industry, because that's pretty much where all of our food is sourced for Canada, right? Like the prairies, like kind of like the middle of Canada is full of on farming and full on oil and gas. Then if that is your customer, then your research and your target should be that, meaning that you will have a few companies operating out of these tech hubs, let's say Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver, supporting these companies located out of there. But as a tech hub per se, operating out of Calgary, I don't think they have they don't have the resources as Erin explained at the beginning. We are a vast country, but we don't have a lot of people living in it, right? And most of the resources that work in technology are always located in these hubs that Erin has showcased throughout the presentation, right?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Maria Teresa, you have your hands raised.
Yes, hi everyone, this is Maria from ProColombia. I just wanted to ask you guys to write your name and your company's name on the chat so we can keep the information of the people who are connecting to all the sessions. So if you could please send your name, your full name and company's name, we would appreciate it.
Do you have any more questions for today? And I know we are running like 5-7 minutes on top of the hour. So do you have any more questions for Erin? If not, I appreciate it so much. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Erin, for this valuable information. And also, I want to remind you all that we have a second session for this module on Thursday. We will continue to review the little assignment that we sent in December. So keep it on the back of your minds. Bring that assignment with you for that session. Kind of look at the questions that we send you with that and compare to what we started to show you today about the Canadian customers and try and start adjusting, right? I think that's what will help you at the end, looking at what you have in terms of business planning and try to adjust to the Canadian market. So Luis, I see your hand raised. All right, so if Luis, do you have any questions? I guess you're mute.
Well, if you allow me to, let me just jump in and we can keep the conversation going through the Slack, which is the channel of communication we pick. I mean, if there's any question, if there's any suggestion, if there's any idea that comes up to your mind, don't hesitate to share. And yeah, I see you on Thursday. Thank you very much to the Pavo Labs team and Erin for today's session.
You're welcome. So I'll see you Thursday. The session starts at 4. This session has 2 hours. Hopefully we have a break in the middle. For now, I let you go, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Erin, for your presentation.
Thanks, everyone.
Viviana, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.